traveled to Louisiana to the ICE detention facility she was thrown in and got the chance to meet Mesa Ozturk. Joining me now is Senator Ed Markey, Democrat of Massachusetts. Senator, it's good to have you on the program. First, just tell us about your meeting with Ms. Ozturk.
Well, it was powerful. She has an incredible spirit, given the conditions, because just 4 weeks ago, she was swept off the streets of Somerville, Massachusetts, a Tufts University graduate student, taken to New Hampshire, then to Vermont, then down to Atlanta, and then over to a remote part of Louisiana and put in prison. The whole way, they didn't show her the warrant. They would not allow her to call her lawyer. It was obviously terrifying for her. She feared for her life. She had no idea what was happening. She felt that they were people who meant her harm, that could actually kill her. And given all that, and the fact that she's been in this prison 1,500 miles from Somerville, Massachusetts, and a 3-hour drive outside of New Orleans, her spirit is high. But again, she has asthma, and she continues to suffer from asthma and the need for medication. But through it all, she is someone who knows that she has done nothing wrong, and she knows that there are many other people, even in that prison, who are similarly situated. That is, that they're in prison with no crime having been alleged against them and no evidence to convict them or prove that a crime had been committed. And so to that extent, it was a privilege for us, Congresswoman Presley, Congressman McGovern, and I from Massachusetts, to have met with her.
It's so just insane to me this woman is being detained. I mean, her freedom has been taken away because she wrote an op-ed. Now, the government could have said, pursuant to this authority, we're revoking your visa, you have to leave the country. One question, I suspect if this happened to an American in Turkey, say an American student in Turkey, put into a Turkish prison because they wrote something the Turkish government didn't like, that this would be an international issue, that I would hope and assume our embassy would say to the government, you can't do this, and try to get them out. As the Turkish...
A debate going on at Tufts University. Beyond that, they have charged her with nothing. And so to the extent to which this is more like Russia or more like Belarus, where someone might be swept up off the street and put in a prison with no charges and no lawyers, no evidence produced, that's really where we are right now in the United States. And it's not just her. She's not alone. Mahmoud Khalil is in the same situation in a different prison, and we went and visited him. And it's so bad for him. No charges against him, by the way. No evidence produced against him. No crime that they allege that he has committed, except Marco Rubio says that they should just be pulled out of their communities and put into prisons. That's the total extent of it. So it's a violation, first of all, of the First Amendment. Freedom of speech, that is not expendable. It's a violation of the First Amendment, of the Fifth Amendment, rather, due process. That's not expendable. In fact, both of them are indispensable in having a constitutional government. And right now, Rubio is acting illegally and unconstitutionally on behalf of Donald Trump. And he's doing it over and over again. And the victims are people like Ramesa and Mahmoud, and many others who are suffering because of this dictatorial, rogue, authoritarian government that believes that it is independent of any of the laws which have governed our country going all the way back to Patriots' Day 250 years ago here in Lexington and Concord, which we're celebrating this week.
Yeah, I would add, among those victims, Mahmoud Khalil's wife, who just gave birth to their son, his wife, who is an American citizen, the son, who's an American citizen. I just note that for the record. I want to ask you this.
Can I just say, we asked Mr. Khalil about that. We congratulated him on having his first child born to him on Monday, and we met with him on Tuesday. He had requested his ability to have a furlough to just go for a day, to be with his wife and new son on the day that he was arriving. And ICE just refused it, but they refused it because Marco Rubio's order with no documentation is the guiding legal overriding, governance of this prison. So it was just a further example of the inhumanity, the appalling lack of respect for the dignity of people like Mahmoud and Ramesa, that he was denied the ability to even be there with his wife and son on the day he was born.
Let me ask you this, Senator. You've been in public life for quite some time. You served in the House for many years. You served the U.S. Senate. You've seen the Reagan administration. You've seen George W. Bush after 9/11 and Guantanamo. Some of the awful cases there of cab drivers who, ended up getting turned in as terrorists when they were no such thing. Denied in the beginning habeas corpus. This specific thing of lawful residents, broken no laws, here legally, being taken off the street for political speech. Have you ever encountered that in your time in public life?
We're witnessing things that even Richard Nixon would never even dream of doing. We're in unprecedented historical times in the United States right now. It's all part, obviously, of the Roy Cohn mentorship of first Joe McCarthy, then Richard Nixon, and ultimately Donald Trump. He's the mentor for all of them. And he had 3 rules: attack, attack, attack. Number 1. Number 2, never admit that you made a mistake, ever. And number 3, always declare victory.
Yeah.
So that's where we are. We're in the pluperfect form of this lesson that Roy Cohn taught Trump. He believes he's not bound by any rules whatsoever. It's McCarthyism on steroids as he whisks people off of the streets with no charges, putting them behind barbed wire, which is where we had to meet Ramesa, which is where we had to meet Mahmoud yesterday. So this is all new territory, and it's imperative that America stand up. And so that's why we're so proud of Harvard University fighting against authoritarianism, why we're so proud up in Boston of Wilma Hale, the law firm, fighting. It's why we put 100,000 people on Boston Common just 3 weeks ago, up and fighting, and this just has to continue to build and build a momentum across this nation. We are seeing a fundamental authoritarian undermining of the constitutional privileges, rights that were fought for by generation after generation, which are being shown no respect by Donald Trump or, in this instance, Marco Rubio, who is the absolute handmaiden of Trump in his efforts to absolutely circumscribe the constitutional rights that everyone is entitled to.
Senator Ed Markey, Massachusetts, thank you for your time.
Great to be with you. Thank you.
Still to come, there is a complete meltdown in the building. After another security failure, things continue to crumble for Trump's Secretary of Defense. Next.
If you're living with moderate to hold you back, but now there's Skyrizi, so you can be all in with clearer skin.
Things are getting clearer, I feel free to bear my skin, yeah, that's on me. Nothing is everything.
With Skyrizi, you...
The acute dysfunction at the top of the world's most powerful military doesn't seem to be going away because it's actually getting worse. Today, Politico is reporting that Pete Hegseth, quote, surrounded himself with advisors. Bitter brawl has now unraveled into revenge power plays, surprise firings, accusations of leaking, and embarrassing headlines that are blowing up the Pentagon, distracting from Trump's agenda, and possibly jeopardizing Hegseth's job. Now, the Defense Department is notoriously nonpartisan, avoids deviating from decorum, so an eruption of infighting is only making Hegseth's stain on the Pentagon worse. Quote, there is a complete meltdown in the building, and this is really reflecting on the Secretary's leadership, said a person familiar with the matter. Pete Hegseth has surrounded himself with some people who don't have his interests at heart. Joining me now is one of the reporters of that story, Paul McCleary, who covers the Pentagon for Politico. Paul, I got to say, this is a very illuminating piece. Thank you for your and your colleagues' reporting. Let me just start by one of the ways that you framed this that was useful for me was there was some notion when this person who didn't have a traditional resume for this job was confirmed, he would be surrounded by people with a lot of institutional knowledge and a lot of experience at the top. And yet it seems he kind of brought in his people at the top, and that's been part of the problem.
Yeah, a few of the Dan Caldwell is one of his top advisors, and Darren Sullivan. Like I'd worked with Hegseth a little bit in the private sector when Hegseth was working with veterans organizations, right? So he knew them previous to this, and he brought him with him to the Pentagon. They both had some Pentagon experience, but not normally as much as people in those roles would have. They're both veterans, so they'd both been in the military. They both had served, and then a long time. He had, again, a little bit of Pentagon experience, but none of these guys were really in the building for years and years and years and built those relationships as these top advisors normally do, or else they're former senior officers many times and things like that. So it's a group that come in who are not, you know, newbies to Washington, but pretty new to the building and pretty new to this sort of organization. I mean, it's a massive global organization, right? Millions of people in uniform, about 800,000 civilian employees around the world, and it's a big job to manage all these fiefdoms, you know, as well as being a diplomat when you go overseas. So this is a brand new thing, and especially it makes it difficult when people who hadn't really been there before, and Hegseth, who had never, you know, he was in the Army, he retired as a major from the Guard years ago, but he had never done anything even close to this size or scale.
The other thing that was clarifying about your piece is that the rivalries here, I mean, clearly these people, 3 people have been marched out of the building. The chief of staff, Casper, has been relocated. There's tons of leaks that reflect incredibly poorly on Pete Hegseth. He had a makeup studio installed at the Pentagon. Today we just got reporting that he had Signal installed on his computer at DOD, which I guess would make it easier to copy and paste, but also seems like maybe not a great idea. Obviously, these guys all kind of hate each other now, but one of the things that came through in your piece was there's not some ideological stakes here. Like, this is purely personal pettiness at this point where they all kind of hate each other.
Yeah, I mean, it boils down to a personality clash. It's not like there's this kind of neocon versus MAGA feud or something like that. They're all pretty much on the same page. Dan Caldwell, he tweeted over the weekend with the other 2 advisors who were fired. They released a statement saying they fully support President Trump's agenda. They fully support what he wants to do internationally and with the military, but they just clashed with Casper. And, you know, the leak accusations are what really sunk the ship here, right? I mean, I think Hegseth thought was told that these guys were all leaking. And they leaked, you know, the story that came out of Elon Musk coming to the Pentagon to get Chinese war plans and other things like that. And they all claim it's not true, that they did not leak these stories. And there was an investigation launched, and they said that they were not given polygraphs, which some defense officials had claimed that they were, and that there's no evidence against them, and they were marched out of the building because of this personality clash.
One of the pieces of reporting is just that Joe Casper, who was the chief of staff, had a meeting where he started the meeting by telling people about his bowel movement, that there was another instance in which he recounted, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, like a trip to a strip club. Is that what you've reported?
That is what we had been told by multiple sources, yes, and I think it's been corroborated by other news organizations as well, both of those stories. About
this is the chief of staff for the Secretary of Defense.
Yes. Yeah, he liked to shake things up, I guess is a polite way to put it, in meetings. He also had a habit of calling senior military officials officers in the military. Well, Pete Hegseth is Secretary of Defense, and I imagine he will be for quite some time. I mean, it took the Trump administration a lot of time and effort to get him through the Senate, right, the confirmation hearing. So they're not going to give up on him. And he's executing the president's agenda, right? DEI, you know, getting woke out of the military, transgender, things like that. He's doing everything that the president promised he would do. So he's fulfilling on his promises. He's bringing in new advisors now, right? His junior military assistant, a Marine Corps colonel, put in his papers to retire, and he's likely going to be one of his advisors. And I think there's some jockeying for position now with some other people who may have less experience than the previous three gentlemen did, but we're not really sure. We'll have to see who he brings in. But it'll have to be people who he trusts, because the circle of people he trusts, I think, is constricting at this point.
I don't think the trust is the key problem here. Paul McCleary, thank you very much. Appreciate your time. That is All In on this Wednesday night. The Rachel Maddow Show starts right now. Good evening, Rachel.
Good evening, Chris. Thank you, my friend. Much appreciated. And thanks to you at home for joining us this hour. Very happy to have you here. The thing of all federal funding, all federal grants. And then less than 48 hours across the country. The Monday evening memo from the White House Office of Management and Budget sparked uncertainty and left the White House scrambling to explain what would and wouldn't be subject to a pause in funding. So it was kind of the first. This is a real oops. Jeffrey Goldberg, editor of The Atlantic magazine, headline: "The Trump administration accidentally texted me its war plans." Then this one, headline: "Trump administration also pulled out." Where is Steve Witkoff today instead? He is getting ready
to go to the United States. We don't have that uniquely American innovation ecosystem, and yet the President of the United States is going at the basic research foundations and the institutions of higher learning that have set America apart. Amazing. So there is a kind of remarkable way in which our competitors and adversaries have got to be looking at this and saying, what the heck is going on? And we can't believe our luck.
When it comes to the conflict in Ukraine, Marco Rubio pulling out of these London talks, President Trump once again attacking Ukraine's president, J.D. Vance essentially presenting the Kremlin's dream of what of how this war would resolve as America's idea, or at least his idea about what should happen here. I mean, part of what you described in terms of not just America's adversaries, but America's competitors stepping up and taking up some of the space that we used to take up. I wonder if you think that the Europeans and Ukraine's other allies essentially can band together in a strong enough way to supplant the role that we've had. If we're effectively siding with Russia, we're not just getting out of this. We appear to be very much siding with Putin's take in this war. Do you think that Ukraine and its allies will be strong enough to take up that space where we used to be?
It's a great question. Let me start by saying that it's really difficult to bring about a just and durable peace in Ukraine, and I will be the first to acknowledge that. But what is amazing to me, and you kind of pointed this out in your opening comments, is the way that the United States has approached this negotiation is to give Russia formal recognition of Crimea, which is sovereign Ukrainian territory, formal recognition of it as a Russian territory. Something, by the way, Rachel, China hasn't even done. China doesn't recognize Crimea as part of Russia.
I wanted to check in with you again, as we have done sort of periodically, to get your sort of gut check, your sense about where the resistance to Trump is heading towards that 100-day benchmark. I feel like the protests are bigger, more widespread, more sustained, more diverse, getting more media attention, and starting to get more political effect visible in terms of the response to what's been happening. That's just my view from outside, though. How does it look to you from inside?
We got to organize. I've told you.
Good evening, Rachel. We have Senator Chris Van Hollen joining us tonight. The earliest he can get to us, he says, is 10:40 p.m., so we're just saving the slot right there, eager for him to join us. That case is moving along. It'll be interesting to see what his reaction is to the judge in the case of Mr. Abrego Garcia accusing Donald Trump's Justice Department lawyers of bad faith. Those words, bad faith, in court filings. That's something judges don't usually do. But he apparently, the senator, experienced some of that bad faith when he went to El Salvador and came back, as he reported to you in his first interview about it in his meeting with Mr. Abrego Garcia. He experienced the bad faith of the Trump arrangement down there.
Yeah, well, you know, and it does feel like, I think in part because Senator Van Hollen has forced the issue. And I feel like that case is inevitably coming to a head, right? The Trump administration has decided to try to dance around this issue and to dance around the direct questions from this judge, and to try to, kick it upstairs, kick it to the Fourth Circuit, kick it to the Supreme Court, try to kick it back to the Supreme Court. They've tried to dance around this for so long, but Senator Van Hollen has called the question. Everybody knows that the questions must be answered, and we're coming to the end of the period around which the Trump administration can continue this strategy, and it's all been forced by Senator Van Hollen. I'll be really interested to hear what he says tonight, given how stark things are getting in that courtroom.
10:40 p.m. Is when we expect to get to him, so we're eager. Thank you, Rachel.
I'm ready. Thanks.
Thank you. Trump chickened out. Now, I know what you're thinking. That's not the kind of language I use on this program. That's the kind of language that I and I hope you have come to regard as beneath the dignity of this hour of television, mostly because I studiously avoid cliche, and chickened out is like a wicked, lazy cliche, really cliche phrasing. It's the kind of thing you can expect from the lowbrows of social media world, where Elon Musk, who makes the mistake of thinking he's actually quite funny, often uses even uglier language. But Trump chickened out is actually big news today, big news in China, where the hashtag Trump chickened out was trending on Chinese social media. Chickened out is language beneath the dignity of the Wall Street Journal editorial board, of course. So tonight, instead of saying chickened out, they wrote this. Another harsh reality is that China called Mr. Trump's bluff and seems to have won this round. Beijing has also warned countries not to do trade deals with the United States that exclude China, or else. With even U.S. allies facing Mr. Trump's tariff assault, Beijing's threat has resonated in a way that it never previously did. U.S. diplomatic sway is ebbing. The question going forward is whether Mr. Trump is internalizing these economic and political lessons or merely pausing to fight his trade war another day. We doubt even Mr. Trump knows the answer, since so much of his decision-making is ad hoc. And so there's the Wall Street Journal saying, Donald Trump doesn't know what he's doing. And in Wall Street Journal speak, yeah, they said he chickened out. They did. And so, after trying to play the world's biggest tough guy by launching a trade war with China and the world, Donald Trump not only did not scare China a bit, but he is being humiliated in China as the world's biggest clown and the most economically incoherent American president China and the world have ever seen. Now, remember way, way back to last week when Donald Trump was promising that he would have a big, beautiful trade agreement with China very soon, like now or sooner. No one in China is calling the White House. No one. And so, with absolutely no proposal on the table from China, no concession from China, nothing but sharp, targeted, retaliatory action taken by China against the American economy, Donald Trump has decided to surrender to China without China giving Donald Trump anything in return. Absolutely nothing. Donald Trump said today that he was going to, at some time unknown, cut his absurdly high tariffs on Chinese goods, saying that the tariffs will, quote, come down substantially, but it won't be zero. Those were his words, won't be zero. So now, tariffs that were 145%, Donald Trump is saying, won't be zero. Okay. And because Donald Trump is publicly losing his trade war and publicly surrendering to China, the stock market gained back some of its massive Trump losses today. The stock market wants Donald Trump to lose. That's what they're saying. They want him to lose his trade war. The stock market wants Donald Trump to surrender in the craziest worldwide trade war ever initiated in the history of the world. And that's why the stock market went up today, because the Trump tariffs are terrible for the American economy, terrible for American consumers, terrible for American workers, and terrible for Wall Street. And Donald Trump said they're going to come down. It's all it took. It's all it took for the stock market to go up. Remember when Donald Trump was promising how quickly China would be calling him, the president of China would be desperately calling Donald Trump to make a deal? Here's what the Chinese government spokesperson said today, quote, "Claiming it wants to reach an agreement with China while constantly applying maximum pressure is not the right way to engage with China, and it simply won't work. China's position on the tariff war initiated by the United States is very clear. We do not want to fight, but we are not afraid to fight. If it's to fight, we'll fight till the end. If it's to talk, our door is wide open. We'll fight to the end." The rest of the countries of the world have absolutely no doubt which side of the Trump versus China trade war is willing to fight to the end and which side chickened out. Donald Trump, the man who never apologizes, the man who never backs down, but in fact frequently backs down, sounded like he was trying to apologize to China.
With China. Are you going to play hardball with them? Are you going to mention COVID?
Well, I'm not going to say, no, I'm not going to mention COVID. I'm not going to say, oh, I'm going to play hardball with China. I'm going to play hardball with you, President Xi. No. We're going to be very nice.
Oh, he's not going to blame them for COVID. Remember when he said he was going to blame them for COVID, like last week, make them pay for COVID in whatever his final trade deal with China would be, in his trade war with China? That's what he said. He brought it up. That's why he was asked about it today. Are you going to blame them for COVID-19 when you're negotiating with them? And he said, oh, no. That was the cowardly lion roar you were hearing. That was the Trump nonsense. Now, Donald Trump is publicly begging President Xi to call him. And President Xi is not calling. The president of China is not picking up the phone. He's sending out a spokesperson to say, we'll fight to the end. No one in the Trump administration has said, we will fight to the end. Donald Trump wouldn't dare say today, we will fight to the end. His Treasury Secretary didn't dare say, we'll fight to the end. His usually clownish Secretary of Commerce, Howard Lutnick, wouldn't dare say, we'll fight to the end, because they won't, because they've already lost. Donald Trump's constant public flailing around ignorantly about tariffs in the White House these days has become a much more difficult rhetorical challenge for him than the way he idiotically talked about tariffs during the presidential campaign and lied to his voters every single time. He constantly told his campaign rallies that China would pay the Trump tariffs. He constantly told voters that not one of them would ever pay a Trump tariff, when in fact all of them and only them would pay the Trump tariffs, and China would never, and no foreign country would ever pay a tariff imposed by the United States. They never have, they never will, because that is not how tariffs work. Donald Trump never admitted that a Trump tariff, a tariff imposed by the United States, is simply an increase on the price of that product in the United States and only in the United States, and is only paid by buyers in the United States. But today, in his desperate tariff ramblings, Donald Trump finally admitted in one line, one little line, how tariffs actually work. Donald Trump said the words, and this was very little noticed today by the news media. He said the words about tariffs. He said, you add that to the price of a product. Yeah, That's what I've been saying about Donald Trump's tariffs since the first time he ever used the word tariff years ago. And today, Donald Trump finally, after years of lying every single time he talked about who pays the tariff, after years of lying about that, he finally said in a little noticed comment, which those of you who've joined me in this multi-year crusade against Trump tariffs here in this program really deserve to hear.
So when you add that to the price of a product, you know, a lot of those products aren't going to sell.
That's right, Tariff Man. When you add the tariff to the price of the product, which is exactly how it works, a lot of those products aren't going to sell. And the more products that don't sell, including American products that don't sell because they have components in them that have been tariffed, that is exactly how you get a recession, a really, really big recession. On Monday, Donald Trump met with the CEOs of the big retail stores, Walmart, Target, Home Depot, who told him that they could be 2 weeks away from empty shelves. And everyone in America walking into a Home Depot or a Target or a Walmart and seeing empty shelves would know exactly who to blame.
The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. In Gaza, at least 10 Palestinians were killed, including a child, after an Israeli strike sparked a fire at a school sheltering displaced people in Gaza City. They're among 24 Palestinians killed by Israeli airstrikes on Gaza since dawn. Separately, civil defense workers in northern Gaza report Israeli warplanes have blown up 9 bulldozers being used in humanitarian operations.
These machines serve us, removing the rubble from the streets and retrieving the martyrs from under the rubble. At the very least, they provide us with a room or tent above our homes. The Israeli occupation came and destroyed them. The occupation is still causing us harm.
On Tuesday, Gaza's health ministry said Israel's total blockade of Gaza had cut off access to polio vaccines, putting the lives of over 600,000 Palestinian children at risk. In New Haven, Connecticut, protests have erupted on the campus of Yale University over the planned speech this evening by Itamar Ben-Gvir, the far-right Israeli security minister who openly supports the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians. In 2007, Ben-Gvir was convicted by an Israeli court of incitement to racism and supporting a terrorist organization. Overnight, about 200 student protesters erected a tent encampment but canceled plans to occupy the space overnight, citing threats of retribution from administrators. Ahead of his visit to New Haven, Ben-Gvir attended a private dinner in his honor at Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate in Florida, alongside Republican lawmakers. Top diplomats from France, Germany, and the United Kingdom, as well as the United States, have postponed a high-level meeting with Ukrainian diplomats in London after U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said he would skip the talks. The diplomats were set to discuss the framework of a U.S. proposed ceasefire deal to end Russia's war on Ukraine. The meeting's abrupt cancellation came as a Russian drone struck a bus in the city of Mahanets, killing 9 people and injuring 42 others. On Tuesday, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky ruled out any ceasefire deal that recognizes Russia's annexation of Crimea, the Black Sea Peninsula Russia invaded in 2014.
Ukraine does not legally recognize the occupation of Crimea. There's nothing to talk about. This is beyond our constitution. It's our territory, the territory of the people of Ukraine. As soon as we start talking about Crimea, about our sovereign territories, we enter a format that Russia wants, which is to drag out the war.
Meanwhile, the Washington Post reports the Trump administration is working to eliminate programs aimed at holding Russia and its leaders and allies accountable for alleged war crimes, including intelligence gathering on Russian atrocities committed in Ukraine. India's military says it's searching for the gunmen who attacked tourists in the city of Pahalgam, Indian-administered Kashmir, on Tuesday, killing 26 people and injuring a dozen others. It's among the deadliest attacks in Kashmir in recent years as pro-independence rebels continue to fight against New Delhi's rule. Hunger and malnutrition are on the rise in Ethiopia due to conflict, severe drought, mass displacement, and regional economic and political turmoil that's left millions of people without access to food. That's according to the World Food Program, which estimates over 10 million people are facing hunger and malnutrition across Ethiopia, many of whom have been forced from their homes due to violence and the devastating impacts of the climate crisis. The agency warns conditions could likely worsen as its life-saving food assistance response in Ethiopia is at imminent risk due to critical funding shortages, including cuts in U.S. foreign assistance.
Now we are at the breaking point. We've been left no choice but suspend completely the treatment for 650,000 malnourished women and children simply because we've run out of commodities and funding. We are now operating with just about 50% of last year's funding. This means that 3.6 million vulnerable people could lose access to WFP assistance in the coming weeks unless funding arrives urgently.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio has announced a sweeping reorganization of the State Department. The changes will include a rollback of programs focused on Africa, the climate crisis, refugees, and human rights, plus cuts to U.S. foreign assistance and the elimination of a body that seeks to investigate war crimes. At least 15% of the State Department's U.S.-based staff will be fired. This is State Department spokesperson Tammy Bruce.
We must make the State Department great again. In its current form, the department is bloated, bureaucratic, and unable to perform its essential diplomatic mission in this new era of great power competition. The sprawling bureaucracy created a system more beholden to radical political ideology than advancing America's core national interests.
The families of several Venezuelan immigrants are demanding answers about their relatives' whereabouts after they were arrested and expelled from the United States to unknown locations. One of the immigrants has been identified as 32-year-old Ricardo Prada Vasquez, a delivery driver who was apprehended in late January in Michigan after making a wrong turn, then transferred to an ICE jail in Texas. Vasquez believed he'd be repatriated to Venezuela, but his family and friends have not seen or heard from him since mid-March, when the Trump administration flew 3 planes carrying over 200 Venezuelans from a Texas detention jail where Vasquez was being held to El Salvador. Vasquez is not on the list of the 238 people confirmed to have been sent there to the mega prison, and he does not appear in any images released by Salvadoran authorities. U.S. authorities confirmed he's been removed from the United States, but a friend told the New York Times, quote, "He has simply disappeared," unquote. Meanwhile, the family of 27-year-old Nayer Adrian Leon Rangel, who is also from Venezuela, says he was similarly disappeared into the U.S. immigration system. He was taken by ICE last month. His family says they haven't heard from him since. Here in New York, a judge has temporarily halted efforts by Mayor Eric Adams to reopen an ICE office inside the Rikers Island jail complex. Adams first signaled the move after he met with Trump's so-called border czar Tom Homan in February. 2 advocacy groups working along the U.S.-Mexico border are accusing Customs and Border Protection of human rights abuses and violating international law over the agency's practice of detaining immigrants and asylum seekers in open-air sites where they're exposed to extreme weather and other dangerous conditions. The Southern Border Communities Coalition and Center for Human Rights and Constitutional Law have warned the Trump administration may expand its use of open-air detention in New Mexico, Arizona, and California by having the U.S. military seize control of a buffer zone along a sprawling stretch of the southern border. The groups are urging the United Nations Human Rights Council to review the practice. A delegation of Democratic lawmakers traveled to Louisiana Tuesday, where they met with Tufts University PhD student Rumeysa Ozturk and Columbia University at the ICE detention centers where they've been jailed since March while they face deportation. Massachusetts Senator Ed Markey led the delegation, joined by Congress members Jim McGovern, Troy Carter, Benny Thompson, and Ayanna Pressley, who spoke to reporters after the meeting.
Well, just another day in Donald Trump's America. Donald Trump and his anti-freedom agenda that means to control our very bodies, that means to control the books we read, that means to control the free press, that means to control free speech.
I mean, did you not see what she had to say about the Pope?
No, how did I miss this? Oh, I missed this.
It's cringy.
It is.
It is. Basically, she was like, God is getting rid of the evil in the world.
And the Pope was part of the evil?
I guess so, because the Pope died. This was her response to him dying.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, she's
wow.
dumb and a lowlife.
Wow, yes. I'd like to see St. Peter reading that. It's like, and it says here.
Secretary not going anywhere.
Secretary of Defense is doing a tremendous job, and he is bringing monumental change to the Pentagon. And there's a lot of people in this city who reject monumental change, and I think, frankly, that's why we've seen a smear campaign against the Secretary of Defense since the moment that President Trump announced his nomination before the United States Senate. Let me reiterate, the president stands strongly behind Secretary Hegseth and the change that he is bringing to the Pentagon, and the results that he's achieved thus far speak for themselves.
So, John, obviously he is.
It's laughing this off and blaming it on someone else. For every service member, for every family member, this is an insult to see him behaving in such a reckless way and nothing happening. Add to that, absolutely no accountability, none. Not taking any, blaming it on other people when it's obviously him. And even worse, hypocrisy. Here's Pete Hegseth, I think back in 2016, talking about others. Take a look.
Apparently, the standard operating procedure inside the Clinton Secretary of State office was to send emails that couldn't otherwise be printed to the maid to print them out of a secure area or from a secure area and then hand them off. Any security professional, military, government, or otherwise, would be fired on the spot for this type of conduct and criminally prosecuted for being so reckless with this kind of information. The fact that she wouldn't be held accountable for this, I think, blows the mind of anyone who's held our nation's secrets dear, who's had a top secret clearance like I have and others, who know that even one hiccup causes a problem, let alone a standard procedure like this. Standard operating procedure inside the Clinton Secretary of State office was to send emails that couldn't otherwise be printed to the maid to print them out of a secure area or from a secure area and then hand them off. Any security professional, military, government, or otherwise, would be fired on the spot for this type of conduct and criminally prosecuted for being so reckless with this kind of information. The fact that she wouldn't be held accountable for this, I think, blows the mind of anyone who's held our nation's secrets dear, who's had a top secret clearance like I have and others, who know that even one hiccup causes a problem, let alone a standard procedure like this.
Really? Wow. Just one hiccup causes a problem. Just one little one causes a problem.
He holds the secrets dear.
He knows so much about how it's important to be careful with our nation's secrets, to not chat about with other people about them, except his wife, his attorney, his brother, and Jeffrey Goldberg, Caddy K.
Drinker and all-around loser. The Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, is binge drinker and binge drinker and all-around loser. The Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, is fighting back against facts that he started classified information on group text with his wife, a journalist, his brother-in-law, his dog catcher, etc. But he has some defenders, and we have a real dipshit senator from our state of Oklahoma. His name is Mark Wayne Mullins. Let me put up the tweet. He says, "I will lead the breach. I will lay down cover fire. I will take the high ground. I'll expose myself to the enemy fire to communicate. We must bring back integrity, focus, and put the warfighter first inside the DOD. I stand with @Secretary of Defense @Pete Hegseth." I just want to point out a couple of things. Number one, Senator Mullen has never served in the armed forces. Nope. Ever. And number two, I think that whole thing's kind of gay. And I'm a huge ally. Like, I'm a huge ally of the LGBTQ plus movement. But I thought that whole, like, I'll take a bullet for you and all of that nonsense. And remember, this is the guy during January 6th that hid and, like, shrunk down. But put up this. Here he is. Here he is with his little booster box. You see it circled there. And this is what we call him at IHIP News, is Senator Booster Box.
By trade, he's a plumber, which is an admirable job. But he was hiding, cowering in fear on January 6th, which I don't blame him. It was scary to be attacked by those people. But I also got a little bit of a love vibe on that. I mean, it was just way overly effusive for a man that has continuously displayed he is incompetent and not equal to the task of being defense secretary.
I mean, don't you think that that's what they have to do, though? It's like this just over the top jet stream of bullshit that, like, the people that call each other patriots online, they see that and they're like, oh, yeah, that's right, patriot. And I mean, and the situation is Mark Wayne Mullen has to stand on a booster box. He hides from the January 6 attackers, which obviously, as you mentioned, that's scary. All right, next up, wake up this morning. Here's the cover of the Wall Street Journal. Dow headed for worst April since Great Depression. And this is what happens when you elect a convicted felon to be president of the United States. And I can't say this enough. The best economies in the world have the best governments. An autocratic government is not going to be conducive to having a stabilizing economy. And beyond just the Dow, the structures and the formations and the foundations of the American economy are teetering because people are pulling their money out and the dollar is no longer a safe place to park your money. Or pulling their money out and the dollar is no longer a safe place to park your money.
One would almost think Trump was a failed businessman and bankrupted casinos at the rate he's destroying the economy. And he keeps going on about Jerome Powell, which impacts the stock market. This is a man that doesn't know what he's doing. This is an administration that doesn't value expertise, that the top economists in the world during the campaign were like, this is not good. This is a tax. People didn't want to believe it. And now here we are. China is getting ready to unite with Europe, leave us out in the cold. I mean, we are going, first of all, we're the biggest laughingstock, which, you know, Kamala Harris said it, and it's true.
Musk gave these back-to-back gestures that people are saying mimicked a Nazi salute. You see it there. Elon Musk has not directly addressed this, but he has appeared to edit out that gesture from the video that he posted on X, the platform he, of course, owns. Help us understand what transpired. Thank you.
Careful with that salute. It wasn't even like a subtle, like a wave, like one of these, like a.
It's okay. It's good to be proud of German culture, German values, and not to lose that in some sort of multiculturalism that dilutes everything.
That's what a Nazi would say.
We don't want Italy as a culture to disappear. We don't want France as a culture to disappear. I think we have to maintain the sort of reasonable cultural identity of the various countries. Or they simply will not be those countries.
Aber der ist wahrscheinlich für Sie auch ein Nazi, hm? Nazis, 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 lauter Nazi.
USA, 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 USA. Ah! Yes.
No, this is the Charlie Chaplin mustache.